Ready to ace that educational researcher interview.
Let's dive right in.
We've got a stack of resources from RoleCatcher to help us break down this career path.
It's amazing how much goes on behind the scenes in educational research.
Yeah, it's not just theories. It's about real-world impact on students and teachers and whole systems.
Right, and it's a field that's constantly evolving.
So let's paint a picture for our listeners who might be thinking, okay, educational researcher, what does that even mean?
Well, imagine you're trying to solve a puzzle, but this puzzle is about how people learn.
Interesting.
Like, how do teaching methods actually impact what students learn, or how do policies shape the whole educational experience?
I see. So these researchers are digging into the big questions.
Exactly. They design these really interesting studies, collect a ton of data, analyze it all, and then try to figure out what it all means for the big picture of education.
So it's a mix of investigation, analysis, and then putting those insights into action.
Absolutely. And this work can happen in so many places, not just universities. You've got research institutions, government agencies, nonprofits, you name it.
So it's not just about the ivory tower. There's real-world application here.
Definitely. There's a huge range of places where this work is happening.
That's good to know. Now, are you ready to tackle some of those interview questions?
Let's do it. I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear some tips.
For sure. I know from the RoleCatcher Interview Guide that one common question is about your experience with quantitative and qualitative research methods.
Oh, that's a classic.
What are interviewers really getting at with this question?
They want to know that you really understand the tools in a researcher's toolbox, and that you know which tool to use for which job.
Okay, so it's not just about being able to define those terms.
Right. It's about understanding the nuances of each approach. Quantitative research is all about the numbers, the data, the statistics, think surveys, large-scale data sets.
Okay, with you.
But qualitative research is about understanding the why behind things. It's about those interviews, the observations, getting into the nuances of the human experience.
So it's about knowing when to apply each method.
Exactly. And that's where specific examples from your own experience come in. Don't just say, I've done qualitative research.
Right, you need to paint a picture for them.
Yes. Tell them about a project where you actually conducted interviews to understand how students felt about a new curriculum.
I see. So you're proving you can do it.
Right. Or maybe you used survey data to analyze how well a teaching strategy worked.
Okay, so vivid examples are key here.
Absolutely.
And then what kind of follow-up questions might they ask to dig a little deeper into that?
Well, they might ask you about the challenges you faced using a particular method, for example.
Okay, so they want to see how you handle those roadblocks.
Exactly. Or they might even ask you to compare and contrast the two approaches, quantitative and qualitative, talk about their strengths and weaknesses.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, it really gets you thinking.
This is where preparation is really key.
Totally agree. Having those examples ready to go can make a huge difference.
And that's where RoleCatcher's AI comes in.
Oh, yeah. RoleCatcher can be a lifesaver in these situations.
So how can our listeners use RoleCatcher to nail this question?
Well, you can use it to tailor your responses to specific job descriptions. Let's say a job really emphasizes quantitative skills well. RoleCatcher's AI can help you fine-tune your answer to really highlight the projects where you dug deep into data analysis.
That's smart. So you're not just giving a generic answer. You're showing them you understand what they're looking for.
Precisely. And speaking of understanding what they're looking for, there's another frequent questions actually in both the interview guide and the interview questions repository. They ask, how do you stay up to date on trends in education?
Okay, so that one seems pretty straightforward on the surface.
It might seem simple, but it's a real chance to shine.
Really? How so? I feel like anyone could just say they read journals and go to conferences.
True, but interviewers are listening for that genuine passion, They want to see that you're really engaged with the field and always seeking out new knowledge.
Okay, so how can our listener go beyond the generic and really demonstrate that?
Specificity is key. Instead of just name-dropping journals, talk about particular publications that you find valuable, ones that really resonate with you.
Like a groundbreaking study or a researcher whose work you follow.
Exactly. Mention those. And don't be afraid to geek out a little. Show them you're genuinely excited about this stuff.
So it's about going beyond the surface level and showcasing your own unique interests.
Definitely. You can even talk about online communities or forums where you discuss research with other educators. Or maybe you've taken online courses or webinars to deepen your knowledge in certain areas, anything that shows you're actively learning.
Okay, so it's about painting a picture of someone who is truly invested in the field, beyond just the basic requirements.
Exactly. And don't forget, RoleCatcher can be your wingman here too.
Oh, right. I almost forgot about our AI buddy.
The AI can scan those job descriptions and highlight keywords related to specific research areas or emerging trends. And then you can weave those into your answer to show that you're paying attention to what's important to them.
Smart move. Okay, let's move on to another key question from the RoleCatcher Guide. How do you go about designing a research study? This one feels like it gets to the heart of what a researcher does.
It really does. This is where you demonstrate that you understand the research process from start to finish.
Okay, so walk us through it.
The interviewer wants to see that you can approach research systematically and thoughtfully with real rigor. Think of it like a recipe, you know? First, you need to identify your ingredients. What's that research question you're trying to answer?
Okay, so that's step one, defining the problem.
Right. Then you need to choose your cooking method. What methodology are you going to use to collect and analyze all that data?
That makes sense. And then what?
Finally, you need to think about how you'll serve it up. How are you going to share your findings in a way that's clear, compelling, and relevant to your audience?
So you're not just doing research for the sake of research. You're thinking about the impact.
Exactly. And what kind of impact you want to make.
So they're looking for that big picture thinking. What are some potential follow-up questions they might ask about the design process?
Well, they might ask you to delve deeper into specific research designs, like experimental or quasi-experimental approaches, for example. Or they might ask you to discuss how you'd ensure the validity and reliability of your data.
Yeah.
You know, making sure your research is rock solid.
So they want to know that you're not just winging it.
They want to see that you understand those nitty-gritty details.
Okay, good to know.
And remember, RoleCatcher can be your research assistant here, too.
Oh, right.
You can use it to brush up on different methodologies and even see how they've been applied in studies similar to the job you're applying for.
It's like having a personalized study guide. That's awesome.
Yeah, it really is a powerful tool. Now, let's shift gears a bit to a question that focuses on problem solving. Can you describe a time you faced an unexpected challenge during a research project and how you overcame it?
Oh, the classic, tell me about a time when question.
I know, right? But it's a good one.
So what are they trying to figure out with this one?
They want to see how you handle pressure, basically. How do you adapt to those unforeseen circumstances that always pop up in research?
Because let's be honest, research is rarely a straight line from A to B.
Exactly. There are always bumps in the road. Interviewers want to know you can navigate those bumps effectively. So when you're answering this question, choose a specific example from your research where you really encountered a challenge. Maybe your data collection hit a snag, or your initial hypothesis turned out to be wrong.
Or maybe your participants dropped out or your funding fell through.
Exactly. Whatever the challenge, describe the situation briefly, highlight the steps you took to address it, and then emphasize the positive outcome.
So it's a story with a beginning, a middle, and a happy ending.
Right. A success story. What they really want to see is your problem-solving skills in action.
Okay, so they're not just looking for someone who can follow a plan. They want someone who can think on their feet.
Exactly.
And what kind of follow-up questions might they ask to dig deeper?
Well, they might ask what you learned from the experience, how it changed your approach to research moving forward, or even how you might handle a similar situation differently next time.
So it's not just about showcasing your problem-solving skills. It's about reflection and growth.
You got it. And don't forget, our good friend RoleCatcher can lend a hand here, too.
RoleCatcher is really pulling its weight in this episode.
You can use the AI to analyze your practice answers and get feedback on how to structure your story effectively. You know, make sure you're hitting all the key points.
That's so helpful. So it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it.
Exactly.
All right, let's tackle another question. How do you ensure that your research is actually relevant and applicable to real-world educational settings?
Ooh, this one's important. It gets to the heart of why we do research in the first place.
Because at the end of the day, it's about making a difference, right?
Absolutely. Interviewers want to see that you're not just conducting research in a vacuum. You're aiming to generate findings that can actually be used to improve classrooms and schools and communities.
So you're thinking about the so what from the very beginning.
Exactly. It's about bridging that gap between research and practice.
How can our listener demonstrate that in their answer?
Well, you can talk about how you involve practitioners in the research process itself. Maybe you collaborate with teachers to design your study, or you get feedback from school administrators on your findings.
So it's about making sure your research is grounded in the real world, and it addresses the actual needs of the people on the front lines of education.
Precisely. And you can also talk about how you share your findings, how you get them out there. Maybe you present at conferences that educators go to, or publish in journals that policymakers read, or you're involved in creating professional development programs for teachers based on your research.
So it's not just about doing the research, it's about making sure it gets into the right hands and has an impact.
Absolutely. And if you can point to specific examples of how your research has actually been used to inform educational practices, that's even better.
Okay, let's get a bit more technical for a second. The RoleCatcher Guide also mentions a question about experience with data analysis software, specifically SPSS or SAS.
Ah, yes, the data crunching question.
So here they're testing your technical skills.
Exactly. They want to know you're comfortable working with data, that you can handle the number crunching side of research.
So it's not enough to just have a general understanding of statistics. You need to know how to use the tools of the trade.
Right. Be specific about which programs you're proficient in and give concrete examples of how you've used them in your research.
So if I've used SPSS to run regression analyses, I should mention that.
Exactly. Or if you've used SAS to run those complex statistical models, talk about it.
So it's all about showing off your data analysis toolkit.
Right. And if you have any certifications or training in those specific programs, definitely mention that too.
And this is another area where RoleCatcher can be really helpful.
Oh, for sure.
You can research the most commonly used software in your field and even find tutorials or practice exercises to sharpen your skills.
That's a great point. You can even see how different programs have been used in studies similar to the one you're applying for.
It's like having a personalized cheat sheet.
It really is. It's all about showing them you're not just knowledgeable, but ready to dive right in.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question in this part of our deep dive. Both the interview guide and the interview questions repository have a question about making sure your research is ethical and follows all the right protocols. And this feels especially important in education, right?
You're absolutely right. Ethical considerations are crucial in any research, but especially when we're dealing with students and teachers and often really sensitive data. Interviewers want to know that you take these responsibilities seriously.
So what are some key things our listeners should emphasize when answering this question?
First and foremost, show that you understand those core ethical principles of research. Informed consent, confidentiality, minimizing any potential harm to participants.
Okay, so those are the big ones.
Right. You can also talk about your experience working with institutional review boards, those IRBs, the committees that review research proposals to make sure they meet those ethical guidelines.
It sounds like it's about proving you're not just a skilled researcher, but also a responsible and ethical one.
Exactly. You can also discuss your commitment to data security, how you handle data responsibly, and your understanding of data management practices.
And of course, RoleCatcher can be a valuable resource here too.
Oh, absolutely.
You can use it to research those ethical guidelines and best practices, making sure your answer is well-informed and comprehensive.
That's a great point. You can even see how other researchers in your field have addressed those ethical considerations in their work.
It's all about learning from the best and making sure you're doing research that is both rigorous and ethical.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Hmm.
So we've really dug into those ethical considerations. It's good to see you thinking about the responsibilities of an educational researcher.
Yeah, it's not just about the research itself, it's about the impact it has on real people.
Exactly. Now, before we get to more interview questions, let's take a step back and look at the big picture, the whole career path.
Okay, sounds good.
The RoleCatcher Career Guide outlines the typical stages, like starting from entry level and working up to a senior researcher. I think it helps to understand where this role could lead.
For sure. So let's start at the beginning. Entry-level researcher. What does that usually involve?
Well, think of it as the foundation. You're learning the ropes, getting a handle on different research methods, and probably assisting those more senior researchers on their projects.
Gotcha. So lots of hands-on experience.
Yeah, you'll be doing things like literature reviews, collecting data, and maybe even helping with some data analysis.
So a good chance to hone those research skills.
Definitely. Then as you move up to a junior researcher role, you start taking on more independence. You might be designing your own research studies, writing proposals, and maybe even trying to get funding for your projects.
Sounds like a big jump in responsibility.
It is. And as you keep gaining experience and expertise, you might find yourself in a senior researcher position, leading research teams, mentoring junior researchers, and contributing to the field through publications and presentations.
So it's a path that really rewards both individual growth and contributions to the whole field of education.
Exactly. It's exciting to see how it all unfolds. Now let's get back to those interview questions, shall we?
Let's do it. I feel like we're making good progress here.
One question you'll probably encounter is, what are your strengths and weaknesses as a researcher?
Ooh, that one always feels a little tricky.
I know, right? It can be a bit intimidating, but it's also a chance to show some self-awareness and a willingness to grow.
Okay, so let's start with the strengths. What are some things our listeners should focus on highlighting?
Focus on those research-related strengths that really match up with the job description. Are you amazing at data analysis? Are you creative at designing research studies? Are you a strong communicator who can explain complex research findings in a way that anyone can understand?
So tailor your strengths to the specific job.
Precisely. And don't just say, I'm a good communicator. Give them specific examples.
Oh, I see. Like, I gave a presentation that was really well received.
Exactly. Or I wrote this report that people praised for being so clear and easy to understand.
So show, don't just tell. Now, what about weaknesses? That part always feels a bit awkward.
Yeah, it can be. The key here is to be honest, but also strategic. Choose a weakness that's real, but something you're actively trying to improve.
Okay, so for instance, I don't have a lot of experience with qualitative research, but I'm taking a course right now on ethnographic methods to get better at it.
Perfect. That shows you're self-aware, willing to learn, and committed to professional development.
Smart. And again, RoleCatcher can help out here.
Right. It's like having a secret weapon.
The AI can analyze those job descriptions and find out potential weaknesses that might come up.
Exactly. And then you can use that information to tailor your response, show them you're ahead of the game,
Wow.
and proactive about filling any gaps in your skill set.
Okay, that's really useful. Now, what about if they ask, what is your experience with? And then they name a specific topic.
Ah, yes, that's where your research background really shines. The interviewer wants to see how familiar you are with specific areas of educational research. See if your expertise lines up with what they need.
So how can our listener get ready for that kind of question?
Well, before the interview, do your homework. Really look over the job description and any materials they've sent you. Research publications from the organization, things like that. Pay attention to the research areas they mention, and think about how your own experience connects to those.
So it's all about making those connections really clear for them.
Exactly. And don't just list your past projects,
Yeah.
Talk about the specific methods you use, the challenges you ran into, and the key things you found. The more details, the better. The more engaging, the better.
Okay, so really paint a picture for them.
Yes. Now, what if they ask about an area where you don't have a lot of experience?
That's a good question because it can happen.
Don't panic. You can still talk about related research you've done or highlight your strong foundation in research methods. Emphasize that you're a fast learner.
Right. Showcase that adaptability.
And don't highlight on your enthusiasm for that area and your eagerness to learn and contribute to their research.
Okay, so it's all about framing your experience positively and showing you're eager to grow.
Exactly. Now let's talk about leadership.
Oh, yeah, because the RoleCatcher Interview Guide mentions that question too. How to demonstrate leadership experience.
Right, and in academia, that can be a tricky one. How do you show leadership when you've mainly been focused on your own research?
That's a good point. It's not always obvious.
Well, remember, leadership doesn't always have to be about formal titles or positions. Think about times when you took initiative, collaborated well with others, or mentored someone.
So like leading a group project in grad school or maybe mentoring a new research assistant.
Perfect examples. Even experiences outside academia can show leadership. Volunteering, community organizations, things like that. They all involve communication, teamwork, problem-solving, essential leadership skills.
So it's about thinking broadly about what leadership means and showcasing those transferable skills.
Absolutely. And guess what? RoleCatcher can help here too.
Of course it can. What can it do?
The AI can analyze job descriptions and pinpoint those specific leadership qualities that are most valued in that role.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've covered leadership, but what about teamwork? Seems like collaboration is huge in research, especially in education.
You're absolutely right. Interviewers want to know you can work effectively as part of a team, bring your expertise to the table, and also learn from others.
So how can our listener really highlight those teamwork skills?
Specific examples, again. Talk about research projects where you worked with others. Highlight your role on the team and what you contributed.
So did I help keep communication flowing? Did I help resolve any conflicts? Did I bring a unique perspective to the team?
Exactly. Show off those interpersonal skills that are so important for successful teamwork. And don't forget to mention those positive outcomes of working together.
Like, did the project lead to a publication or a presentation or a successful grant proposal?
Those tangible results can really make your story stand out.
Okay, now for the question I think a lot of people dread, why should we hire you? It feels so open-ended and intimidating.
I get it, but it's a golden opportunity to really sell yourself, to make a strong impression.
Okay, so how do you craft a compelling answer that goes beyond just, like, summarizing your resume?
Think of it as your elevator pitch, but just for this role. You want to highlight what makes you the ideal candidate. Your skills, your experience, your passion, all wrapped up in a nice little package.
So something like, my background in quantitative research methods, combined with my experience working directly with schools on educational interventions, makes me uniquely qualified to contribute to your research on improving math instruction.
Exactly. You're connecting your skills and experience directly to what they need and showing that you understand their priorities.
That's a good strategy. And RoleCatcher can step in here too, right?
You bet. You can use the AI to break down the job description, see exactly what they're looking for.
Okay, so you can tailor your answer even more. That's smart. Now for another common question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Hmm. This one's all about your goals, your ambition, and how well you fit with the organization's vision for the future.
So how do you answer that without sounding rehearsed or generic?
Be genuine about your aspirations, but keep it relevant to the job and the organization. You don't need to map out your entire career, but do talk about your professional growth goals and how this position helps you reach them.
So for example, I'm really excited about the opportunity to contribute to your research on educational technology. And in 5 years, I hope to be an expert in this area, leading my own projects on innovative ways to use technology in the classroom.
Perfect. You're showing ambition while demonstrating how your goals align with their mission. You see this role as a stepping stone to bigger things.
And again, RoleCatcher can lend a hand with this one.
Of course.
You can use it to research those typical career paths and potential growth opportunities, and even see how the organization itself has evolved and where they might be headed.
Right. That can help you tailor your response even more. Show them you've really thought about how your goals and their vision fit together.
You know, it's really striking me that a career in educational research, it's really all about lifelong learning. You're always keeping up with new trends, you're diving into research, you're constantly growing.
You're absolutely right. And honestly, that's one of the most rewarding aspects of this field. You're not just adding to what we know. You're also constantly learning and growing yourself, understanding how people learn, and how education can be a real force for positive change in the world.
That's amazing. It makes all these interview questions seem a little less daunting, a bit more like opportunities to show your passion and commitment.
That's exactly the mindset you want to have going into it. Remember, those interviewers, they're not just looking for someone who can answer questions by the book. They're looking for someone who's genuinely excited about this work, someone who's going to bring that energy and enthusiasm to their team.
So we've covered a lot of ground on the specific questions, but if we zoom out a little bit, what would you say is the overall message, the big takeaway you want to send during the interview?
You want to paint a picture of yourself as a skilled and passionate researcher who's driven to make a real impact, and someone who's ready to hit the ground running and contribute to their research right away. Show them you understand their priorities, that your expertise fits what they need, and that you're genuinely excited about learning and growing within their organization.
And I think it's clear by now that RoleCatcher's AI can be a huge help in creating that picture.
100%.
You can tailor your resume and cover letter to that specific job description, highlighting the skills and experience that really matter for that role.
Absolutely. And don't forget about practicing your answers, getting that AI-powered feedback. You can rehearse your responses and get those personalized suggestions to make them even stronger, clearer, more impactful.
It's like having your own personal interview coach right there in your pocket.
Exactly. And, all these tools are designed to help you put your best foot forward, present your best self, and convey that genuine passion you have for educational research.
Well, before we wrap up our deep dive, any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they head into the interview process?
Prepare. Practice your answers. And most importantly, let that enthusiasm shine through. You've chosen a field that has the power to transform lives, so let that passion be your guiding light as you step into that interview room.
And with the right preparation and a good dose of confidence, you'll be on your way to making a real difference. Good luck out there. Remember, the future of education is in your hands.